Thanks for having me back again here. So I'm Derek Yu. I'm the CEO of PureStake, and we're primary developers of the project Moonbeam. And I wanted to talk to you today about different kinds of multi-chain deployments that we're seeing in the market. It's been quite an area of like a lot of experimentation in the last 6 to 9 months on this topic. And so I want to give you a little bit of, a report on kind of what we're seeing and, some trends that, we think are going to be important moving forward in this area of multi-chain. But before doing that, let me give you a bit of context on Moonbeam and how that's allowed us to have a bit of a unique point of view on this subject of multi-chain. So Moonbeam is a smart contract network that's part of the Polkadot network, right? So it's a kind of a member blockchain of the Polkadot network. They call those parachains. And the idea behind Moonbeam is that, we've done this kind of full Ethereum implementation in the development framework Substrate. So Substrate's how one develops things in Polkadot. And so we have this kind of full Ethereum-like environment. Think of it, similar to something like Polygon or BSC, where you can kind of use all the familiar Ethereum tools that you're used to, and port dApps, backend smart contracts, front-end dApps with little or no code change. So that's kind of the core idea of Moonbeam and how it fits into kind of this broader Polkadot ecosystem. And just for kind of how we came, how we came out to these points of view on multi-chain, we have talked to quite a few projects at this point, probably something over 200 projects, and talked to them about what their multi-chain plans look like. A good chunk of those 200 projects, are deploying to or have plans to deploy to Moonbeam, in all sorts of different categories. I would say there is definitely a concentration in a couple areas, in the kind of DeFi area as well as the NFT area, but in particular DeFi is one area where Moonbeam we've gotten quite a bit of interest and traction. So it's on the basis of all of these conversations that we've had with all these projects that we've come up with some of the thoughts that I'll be sharing with you here. So, the first question to ask is, why is it that projects are pursuing a multi-chain deployment? And I'd even say this isn't a static set of reasons. These kind of change a bit over time. But if I look back the last nine months or so, there's a few reasons that really stand out. I would actually say that the reason that's probably almost the least important or kind of less important than the others is this kind of idea of scalability or finding available block space. That was much more important 9 months ago. I would say that that's perhaps even decreasing in importance because there's quite a few different kind of options now for scaling and just finding block space. And so while that is one motivation, it's not necessarily the most interesting one from my perspective. The theme again, for a lot of the projects we talk to is this kind of idea of wanting to find new users and new assets. These protocols, particularly DeFi ones, they're kind of thirsty things, right? They're trying to find new users and assets, and they're trying to grow. And there's basically different user sets and different assets on different chains. And just one small anecdote, I'd say that in some of the discussions we've had, I think initially people were maybe a bit hesitant and saying well, do I really want to deploy my protocol to these other chains? Isn't it going to be the same user? So I'll kind of just take the users I already have, but then split them across 2 chains. I'll split liquidity. Maybe that's not a good thing. I think the feedback that we've gotten, from a lot of the teams that we're working with is that turns out to not really be the case. That it's new users, it's different users, and potentially different assets that are on, some of these different chains. So that when you kind of do these multi-chain expansions, it actually is net accretive, right? You're kind of growing things, particularly for a DeFi project that might be looking at TVL. So that's something that's one of the key motivators for a multi-chain deployment strategy. And just, to be a little bit more specific, one particular form of multi-chain deployment that, I would say is, pretty prevalent, I guess kind of the prevalent one is what I'd call an EVM-targeted multi-chain deployment strategy. And, I'll use an example of one of our one of the folks that's projects that's deploying into our ecosystem is Linear Finance. They're pursuing a deployment strategy to Moonbeam, Ethereum, and BSC. And there's one thing that's in common between all of these three target destinations, and that is that they all are kind of EVM compatible or Ethereum like. And you can see that this is kind of a key thing, that it's the kind of Ethereum compatible target chains that are the easiest to deploy to, because you can use the same code base that for a lot of these teams, they're starting from Ethereum. And it's kind of the water finds the path of least resistance kind of situation, where because there's very little engineering work needed, those become the easiest destinations to deploy to, and thus they're the deployment destinations that get the most traction. And I think this is kind of what's happened over the last 6 to 9 months, where you see definitely concentrations of activity on chains like BSC and Polygon, in particular. And so I kind of want to turn this question around a little bit and kind of ask the question, okay, what makes for a good multi-chain deployment environment? And we just talked about one factor, which is this, this EVM and Ethereum compatibility. That's like a big, that's kind of quite helpful, right? But I would say that alone is not sufficient. What we figured out pretty quickly is that you need kind of a lot more kind of surrounding that Ethereum compatible core if you really want to be an attractive deployment destination for projects. I definitely want to highlight one, which is that infrastructure services that the project teams depend on all need to be there too. Chainlink, would be a good example of this, and appropriate given the conference here. So, as we started engaging with different teams in the DeFi space, many of them were saying, okay, well, we rely on Chainlink Oracle data feeds, for our protocol to function. So you need to have a Chainlink integration. So, that's an example of the kind of service you need kind of around this EVM core. And there's others too. So things like advanced block explorers, obviously, using MetaMask is great because you don't have to get people to switch wallets, there's a lot of friction around. Index data services like the Graph or Covalent is something that a lot of dApp front ends rely on. So, there's this whole kind of, collection of infrastructural tools that are needed to augment, kind of the core Ethereum compatibility to make for an attractive deployment destination. The second thing that we figured out was that, and this is a little bit specific to the DeFi area, is that there's all of these DeFi projects, they have dependencies on each other, right? Back to that kind of idea of DeFi Lego building blocks, and so I think the challenge is that it's hard to get any one project to move because they might depend on 3 or 4 other projects. But, how do you get the first person to kind of move? And so I think, this is another thing we discovered, is that you almost need to kind of, get agreement from, a whole collection of people that all cross depend on each other, to move all at once, so that, all of their protocol level dependencies, are satisfied. And so that's something, that, we spent quite a bit of time in the last 6 to 9 months working on. So I kind of wanted to, talk a little bit now about a different kind of multi-chain. So, I've been speaking previously about, this EVM-targeted multi-chain deployment strategy, which is, I'd call it kind of the state of the art these days. That's kind of what, most people are doing. And, there is, this is kind of speaking again to trends where I kind of see, this is the direction I see things moving in the future. So I kind of distinguish this kind of EVM targeted multi-chain, which is kind of like it's almost like a porting strategy, right? So you kind of have a protocol, you're kind of taking the software, you port it to a different chain, then you have kind of a complete installation of that protocol or instance of that protocol on the remote chain. And then you end up with a situation where you have multiple instances of the deployed protocol. And sometimes you have maybe your dApp front end is kind of aware of all those deployments. So there's maybe a single instance of the front end, and you kind of maybe even the user can select, okay, I want to, this is the chain I want to connect to, right? You might even expose that decision all the way up to the user. So that's kind of what we see, as kind of the state of the art right now. But I do think that moving forward, we'll start to see more of what I'm calling native multi-chain. So what is native multi-chain? I do think this is a kind of a pattern that is uniquely enabled by Polkadot. And so I wanted to talk through a few examples to kind of help illustrate like what is meant by this. So let's take a first example of kind of a governance application. So, the way this works on Moonbeam is you would use, your regular Ethereum development tools to develop kind of a governance application. But, Moonbeam itself has a full on-chain governance system that's, built using this substrate development framework. That's not something that's in the EVM, right? That's not something that's like part of what Ethereum is. That's something that we've, implemented like in Moonbeam itself. And so we're kind of extending the EVM then, right? So we have these precompiles, and this is in general kind of the strategy we have for extending kind of the base functionality of the EVM. And so you have this precompile that looks like a smart contract within the EVM, but kind of gives access to this whole on-chain governance system that's part of Moonbeam. And so then a dApp developer can develop like a dApp and develop smart contracts that interact with this governance functionality via this precompile. And so this pattern of kind of using precompiles to extend the base, EVM functionality is something that we're doing quite a bit of, right? So this example is kind of giving access to advanced functionality that's local, but there's other examples too. So let me take another example of kind of a remote asset example. So, DOT is the asset of the Polkadot relay chain. So that's the kind of master chain in Polkadot that provides, security among other things. And so, again, we have this kind of special precompile that kind of allows access to this remote asset. So this DOT asset that's on a different blockchain, a different connected blockchain. And then, developers on Moonbeam can kind of work with DOT as if it's an ERC20. And so that's obviously, very attractive because, there's all these protocols that already, exist that work with the ERC20s. And so we're kind of, under the hood, providing the glue that helps, kind of power that remote access to DOT on a different chain. But that's all done using this kind of native built-in networking protocol that's part of Polkadot called XCM or XCMP. And so that's pretty cool, right? Where you have this app that's on Moonbeam, but it's kind of working with these assets that are remote assets. And the same thing, what can be said of, advanced functionality. So for example, the Polkadot relay chain has staking functionality. That's one of the key functions it has that helps provide security for the whole system. So there again, we can have a precompile that then kind of remotely accesses the staking functionality on Polkadot, but it's all done via this XCMP. So kind of it's all done with this native Polkadot networking. And then developers on Moonbeam can work with that as if it's a local kind of smart contract, but you're in fact kind of, building an application that spans multiple chains. And so this kind of idea, of native multi-chain, I think is going to, be important kind of moving forward. It has this kind of ability to build an application that spans multiple blockchains. And, I think that's quite a powerful idea. So I kind of want to, if I kind of step back a little bit to a higher level, on Polkadot, you may have different specialized chains that perform different functions. You can have something that's specialized in storage. You can have an Oracle service like a Chainlink service. And these services can then be combined, into a single application, even though that application spans multiple specialized blockchains. So that's kind of that's kind of the longer term vision that we're going after. Think of it kind of like something that is like as powerful and as easy to use as AWS, but those services that are kind of being used instead of being centralized cloud services are decentralized services that are powered by blockchains that are part of the Polkadot network. And so I think that this kind of idea of native multi-chain is something that we're going to see quite a bit more of as Polkadot itself kind of like evolves further. And Chainlink is a great example of a service that can be kind of composed into like one of these native multi-chain applications. And so I would just end on, if kind of learning more about native multi-chain applications or multi-chain deployments using an EVM targeted strategy is of interest to you, we'd love to hear from you. We have a website, Moonbeam Network, and we're quite active, on our Discord for technical discussions. So thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much, Derek. I really appreciate your time coming to share with us what Moonbeam is about, what you guys are building, and how it's linking chains, some decentralized DevOps opportunities there as well.